Good afternoon, everyone. We're here this afternoon to discuss a tragic incident that happened late last night. I'm only going to discuss that incident as well as a shooting that occurred after this incident that we don't know if it's related or not. On May 13th, 2019, at approximately 5:42 p.m., Peoria Police responded to the area of the 2800 block of West Ann regarding a shot spotter alert of 22 rounds fired. Upon arrival, officers located two shooting victims in a parking lot of an apartment complex. One victim, Jeremiah Ward, a 4-year-old male, suffered a life-threatening injury and was transported to a local hospital. He is later pronounced deceased. The second victim, a 23-year-old male, was shot in the leg. The adult male victim suffered a non-life-threatening injury and was transported to a local hospital as well. Officers located 19 shell casings that were in close proximity of one another. There's no suspect information at this time. Detectives worked on this case throughout the evening, and all hands are on deck to get information on this case. About an hour later, at 6:39 p.m., officers responded to the 1900 block of North Missouri on several complaints of shots fired. They called in about 20 to 30 shots fired. There was no shot spotter alert that came in on that call, and that's something that we'll be following up on. Shell casings were located on the porch of a residence in the 1900 block of Missouri. In all, 4 houses were struck by gunfire, but there are no injuries reported in that case. Officers did recover a rifle in the odd alley of California Street. However, no suspects or victims were located. Later, a male with a gunshot wound to the torso arrived at a local hospital, but was evasive as to where he was shot. We're still trying to determine if this shooting is connected to the earlier homicide, so it may be connected. That's what we're trying to determine. There's no suspect information at this time on either of the shootings. Earlier this morning, detectives were out in the area and conducted an additional canvass. And then at 1 p.m., we met with Crime Stoppers and PCAB, Peoria Community Against Violence, and conducted another canvass. We know that there is some video footage out there, so we are seeking any video footage that anyone may have. And regardless of if it was taped off of a cell phone, we have seen Facebook video, so we know that there is video out there. Please contact the police department so that we can review it, see if we can gain anything from that. Also, just to kind of cover what we know at this time, this appears to be an ambush style of shooting. The victim pulled up in the vehicle, and a very short time later, the suspect opened fire. We are still trying to contact a person that we know that was in the vehicle. So detectives and officers are out looking for that person at this time. And also, based upon the investigation, we believe that people with firsthand knowledge of the incident are withholding information, which is very frustrating. Like I've always said, we cannot solve this without the community's help. And when we know that a person is withholding information, it's very frustrating. So we urge and plead the community to come forward and with any information, no matter how minor they believe it is, in regard to the murder of this innocent child. The officer in charge of the investigation is Detective Matt Legaspi. We also have 2 other detectives assisting him with the investigation, Detective Vasquez and Detective Michelin. So if anybody has any information and they need to talk to a detective, they can call the non-emergency number and ask for any of the detectives that I mentioned. Then they can also call Crime Stoppers with information and remain anonymous. So I cannot urge the public enough to come forward with anything on this, and it is a tragic case. With that, I'll go ahead and take a few questions before I turn it over to Coroner Harwood.
Chief, you have been an officer for a long time.
Yeah.
Your father was a cop. I watching you here, and you're having a hard time reading this. This has obviously affected you. When you say folks are doing all that they can, what are you going to do to try to motivate folks?
In this sort of case, Andy, I don't have to do anything to motivate detectives. This is something that just the mere fact that this case happened, the detectives are motivated, and all officers, not only detectives, the Special Investigations Division, the patrol officers, everyone is motivated in this case.
Chief, you mean to say that there was an assault on this vehicle and the person who was driving the vehicle, the adult who was in the vehicle with the child,
Yes.
fled?
No, so to kind of paint that picture and lay it out, so the vehicle pulled into the driveway of the residence, and when they stopped, is within a few minutes that the shots started being fired, but the driver of the vehicle is the 23-year-old male that was struck in the leg. A backseat passenger, which is another male whom we are looking for, fled the scene because shots were being fired. And then the what we know now is that the 4-year-old had exited the vehicle, went towards the apartment, and was coming back when the shots started.
Got it, thank you.
Were the child and the adult related?
I'm sorry, what adult?
The 23-year-old adult and the 4-year-old child?
Not to my knowledge, there's no relation there. However, the mother of the child was in the vehicle.
The mother of the child.
And she was unharmed?
She was correct, she was not injured. And that's why I say when we believe that there are people with firsthand knowledge of this incident that are not being forthcoming with information, that is what is frustrating about where we are in this case right now.
So you do believe that this was a targeted shooting?
Yes, I believe that this was a targeted incident, and the possibly the driver would have been the target of the incident, and the child was an unintended victim.
Coroner Harwood, the child had to be taken to the hospital. The child did survive the initial part of the shooting.
I'll talk about that, Gary, when I go in to speak. I'll answer that question.
Chief, a bunch of us were at the scene, and we saw a bunch of little placards in the grass. I assume that there was a shell casing. Was this? Do you have any idea of what type of weapon this might have been, based on the type of shell, based upon the type of shell casing, based
Sure.
upon the evidence that you found, based upon the spray of the weapon?
Sure. The shot spotter alert was for 22 rounds, and due to the investigation, I'm not going to release the caliber of the weapon. However, we did recover 19 shell casings. And so some of the sounds, either we didn't find 3 casings, or it could have been an echo, that how they came up with the 22.
Can you tell if it was a semi-auto? Can you tell if it was a rifle or a pistol?
Appears to be a semi-automatic pistol.
Okay.
And just one weapon was fired? Only one weapon was fired?
That is what we believe.
Why do you think people are withholding information?
Why they are, I don't know. I wish I can answer that. Why a 4-year-old, when you have a 4-year-old injured and dead, why anybody would hold information, I have no idea. I don't know.
Chief, do you think that at this time in the investigation, do you think it's gang-related at all?
We are familiar with the driver of the vehicle, so it is possible that there may be some gang or group involvement in this.
Any idea what they were doing in the car at that location at that time?
I don't know enough about that portion of it to be able to say something, and I don't want to be wrong about it.
Do you think that there could be possible retaliation from this?
Like I said, on the shots fired on Missouri, where the suspect or where a person showed up at the hospital, that could be related. We also had shots fired later in the evening or earlier in the morning on another round of shots fired up on Missouri. So that could be connected. So if we determine that's connected, I'd say it's a possibility of retaliation.
Chief, there was also a shots fired call in the Taft area. There was also one on Thrush and Knoxville. It seems to be mostly on the East Bluff with the except of the Taft and down south. Is there any sense that this is the normal type of thing where you have certain parts of the town who don't like certain other parts of the town? Or are you hearing any type of beats or anything like that?
No, I don't want to speculate.
Because Andy, it wasn't a shot spotter at Thrush in Nashville, it was a call that came in, somebody called in that a shot was fired.
Oh, so it was
not a
just
shot spotter.
it was not a shot.
That's correct, it was a
Oh,
phone call.
just a call.
Somebody
Okay.
called in,
Alright.
and basically is, I hate to do this, but I think we're kind of losing focus. You know, we've got a 4-year-old kid that's dead, and I think we need to stay focused on that. If we can show correlation between other incidents, we'll do that, and we're doing everything we can to get this solved, so.
I think what I
Sorry,
hear
Chief.
you saying, Chief, is that you're imploring upon anybody who has any information, given the people who were in the vehicle
Right.
and around the vehicle, possibly up to and including this child's mother, are not coming forward with information. Therefore, you're asking this community
Correct.
to gather around this and come forward if they have any information.
Absolutely. We know it was a decent evening. We know people were outside, and we know somebody saw something. So now it's, we believe that there are people withholding information.
Councilwoman Ali, as part of the Police Community Advisory Commission, when the chief talked about not knowing why people won't come forward, do you have any idea why people wouldn't come forward, and what would you say to people to urge them to come forward?
I'm going to make a statement, and once
After
the
we're
chief
done.
gets done with questions, and I am going to speak to that, Gary.
And Chief,
Yeah.
can you just talk to us about the importance of these shot spotters and how they play a role in finding,
Sure, yeah, because I know Springfield is just getting shot spotter. And one of the things with shot spotter, when that alert came in, the officers get that within seconds of the shot spotter alert. So we're already en route to the call before people start calling in, because there's a lot of times that people don't call in. So when we have a 4-year-old victim and another adult victim, officers are already en route to that call.
And that thing basically uses mics, right? It uses acoustics.
Sensors, yeah. And again, I don't want to get off on a side note of that, because we are here for Jeremiah Ward to discuss that.
So as far as the canvas earlier this morning or this afternoon, would you say that that was helpful at all for the case?
I think it's good, especially when we work with the community, with PCAV and with Crime Stoppers, to be out in the community, going door to door, making contacts. whether somebody gives us information at that specific time or not, we go around and we hand out the flyers, and that gives them the opportunity to call at a later time. Because, you know, at night when the incident happened, several police around, people may not want to be seen talking to the police. So this further gets the word out and gives them an opportunity to give us a call.
Is anyone able to come and help with the Crime Stoppers, PCAD, and the Peoria Police Department and canvass the neighborhood?
Absolutely. PCAV, Peoria Community Against Violence, that's all of the community. So anybody can get involved with PCAV.
So how do you feel about the turnout this afternoon of people that actually showed up to canvass?
Today was the largest turnout that I've seen in all the previous cases that we've done, and that just shows the level of severity of this case.
Chief, have you or any of the detectives been able to make contact and talk with the child's mother?
Yes, she has been talked to.
Was this child ever awarded DCFS
I don't know.
or in the care case file, anything related?
I don't know. So what I'll do now is turn it over to Coroner Harwood, and you can go there, so trade your seats. Sure.
I think we can all understand the gravity of the situation that we're sitting in here this afternoon here at the police department. Thank you, Chief Marion, and the Peoria Police Department, who I know is working very, very diligently on bringing justice to this 4-year-old Jeremiah. It's devastating, to say the least. I had some time to speak with Mom last night and Dad last night, and then again this afternoon. Mom describes Jeremiah as a loving child who randomly would run up to her and grab her by the neck and kiss her and hug her and tell her that he loves her. I can't express enough how much support the family is going to need, as well as our community. And to echo the chief, the community, to bring answers to this. None of us can imagine losing a child, much less losing a child through a senseless homicide. The autopsy this afternoon demonstrated that Jeremiah suffered 3 gunshot wounds. They both entered posteriorly or into the back, and one on the arm. Those types of injuries on anyone is devastating and detrimental, especially for a 4-year-old. His cause of death is going to be related to internal bleeding that was pretty massive and pretty quick. To the question from Gary, he was transported from the scene via ambulance to the hospital. Of course, the efforts that they did at St. Francis were, of course, heroic and tenacious, but with fail, unfortunately, because of the amount of bleeding that was lost. And I'm open to any questions you guys might have. Yes.
In terms of the shooting, was there evidence of stifling?
You know, the doctor made comment. A lot of times I get the question, was it a close range? Was it a point contact? And we don't have supportive evidence of close range fire, so I would say it was from a distance. Andy?
And then, I know any death, investigating that is traumatic and awful, but to see a 4-year-old and to deal with that kind of case emotionally, how was that for you?
You know, it's tough. It's tough because I have children. Most of us in this room right now, we have children. It's tough. It's extremely difficult, and then you put the manner of what happened on top of that, which really amplifies the grief and the difficulty it is. We have a resilient community that I live in, that I'm certain of, that we are resilient. We have a very strong police department, and I have no doubt that we will continue to come together to find the person that did this and bring justice to little Jeremiah. I'm confident of that, which that piece of knowledge helps, I'm sure it helps all of us through that this is not going to go unsettled or unrested.
About how long after he got to the hospital was Jeremiah pronounced dead?
Minutes.
Minutes after he got to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what I'll do is turn it over to Councilwoman Ali and
I've lived in Peoria for over 50 years, and yesterday was one of the saddest days in Peoria's history because a young innocent child died due to senseless violence. As a mother and a grandmother, I can't imagine what Jeremiah's mother, father, grandparents, and family feel right now. Over the last several months, I've been talking about Peoria being a caring community. And despite what happened yesterday, Peoria remains a caring community. So I'm asking our caring community to be strong and to get justice for Jeremiah. We need justice for Jeremiah, and I'm asking everyone who knows anything to speak up, to be strong enough to speak up. And there are ways to do it anonymously. I know that people often refrain from speaking up because they're afraid of retaliation. And retaliation can be real. I know that. But someone has to be held accountable for Jeremiah's death. And his blood is on all of our hands. If we don't stand up and be strong and get justice for Jeremiah. So I'm asking everyone, when you wake up in the morning, to say justice for Jeremiah. And when you go to sleep at night, to say justice for Jeremiah. And if you use social media to put out the hashtag, justice for Jeremiah, justice for Jeremiah. Because we can't be at peace until we get justice for Jeremiah. And I'm not talking about justice in the wrong way. I'm not talking about violence with violence. I'm talking about justice in the right way. Making people accountable and helping our police force. You saw the chief. He could hardly speak about the death of this innocent child. They want to find the killer. And I say to the person that's responsible, the person or persons that's responsible, your soul is never going to be at peace until you take responsibility for Jeremiah's death, that you come forth and turn yourself in. And
One of the things, Chief, Rita, Jamie, Mike, I don't care who, one of the things that we have had issues with in the past is people do not come forward because they are scared. Because they have to live in that same part of town, and you can do the right thing and everyone's happy and they all clap, and then they got to go back home. There's also a certain, I don't want to say code, but kids are not supposed to be shot. Is there anything that the officers, that the city can do to help people feel more safe if they do come forward? Do you sort of get what I'm trying to say at? Because this has been an issue in a lot of slants.
Yeah, so I'll touch on that. So there are processes in place where individuals can be relocated by the state's attorney's office. We do have relocation available. We've done that in the past. And you kind of touched on it a little bit. We're not talking about I don't want to use the word typical, we're talking about a 4-year-old that was murdered. So this does change the optics from my point of view, and I understand that people do have to live in that area. However, like Councilwoman Ali says, that the person needs to be brought to justice, and like I mentioned earlier, we cannot do that without the community's involvement. We have had good community support in the last couple of homicides, and people were coming forward and they saw the results, so I'm hoping that it will carry over to this case as well.
As far as, you know, when we talk about this, and I'm looking at you, Laura, and I've known you for a long time, and I can tell that this is hard, we're the same. But are you guys hopeful that people will come forward? I mean, we have talked to folks, and I was out with the PCAP, and I was out with people last night, and it was the same thing. Nobody saw nothing. Nobody heard nothing. Nobody knows. They take the flyer, and then they close their door.
Again, to bounce off of Councilwoman Ali's earlier statement about Peoria being a caring community, I do believe that Peoria is a caring community, and that I do think that in this case that we'll get people that will come forward. I'm hoping sooner than later, because the beginning parts of this case is the most critical time, so we want people to come forward sooner than later.
And then what's your message to parents in that, who have kids in that neighborhood, just to make sure that they're still feeling safe where they are?
Sure. Like I touched on, this was a targeted event. Tragically, the 4-year-old was struck and killed. So, with the person that was targeted, they do frequent that area. However, it was targeted for one specific person. It wasn't a random drive-by and the child was hit. It was a targeted event.
What can neighbors do to that end to make sure violence like this never happens in their neighborhood again? Never happens in their neighborhood again. What can they do?
You know, I think the big thing is, you know, for them to speak up. You know, again, you know, like the chief and councilwoman touched on. You know, not that you know, we understand that, you know, we have shootings. You know, we have drug dealing in Peoria, and we understand that kind of their code of silence and they handle things themselves. But this is different, you know. I mean, Jeremiah, you know, he obviously, you know, deserved to have a life. You know, he deserved to have a future, and, you know, unfortunately, that was taken away from him. So, you know, this one's different. You know, we're hoping that the community comes together, and we're hoping that we get information and we make a speedy arrest on this.
Chief, one thing, in speaking with someone at the scene earlier today, one thing that he kept mentioning was that you can release all the balloons you want, you can light all the candles, you can have all the vigils, but something has to be done in the communities to prevent this type of thing from happening again. What do you say to all the different groups and the different initiatives, like the Don't Shoot initiative? Have you considered those type of things successful, and what else are you going to be putting forward to make sure that maybe this doesn't happen again?
That's a hard question, because Peoria is a large city, and we are going to have shootings. The purpose of focused deterrence is to prevent the retaliation shootings, and that's one of the things that we immediately implemented last night. Was we have extra patrols out, and we will be addressing the couple of different gangs and groups that are out there that's creating the violence. And the biggest thing is to take the shooters off the street, and that's where the community needs to step up and give us the information so that we can take the shooters off the street.
So you do think that there is a chance that family, friends, anyone who knew Jeremiah Ward will retaliate?
Based upon, again, we're piecing it together, so I can't say 100% sure that it was retaliation on the shootings on the shots fired on Missouri and the individual that got hit on Missouri. I don't know if it's retaliation or not, but that is almost an immediate reaction that someone has, especially when
act like this happens to a child, the immediate response is to go retaliate.
How do you think that neighborhood felt? Like you said, today was the biggest canvas that I've been to personally as well. How do you think they felt seeing so many badges out there going door to door trying to get this information?
Hopefully it gives them, shows that we care and that I told you before, it's all hands on deck on this case. And so hopefully that perpetuates into the community, and then they see that, and then we'll respond back with the information. Thank you.
Thanks.